His war sword sweeps at you in a slicing cross. You parry it with your maul, a thunderclap, but you remember Thecla Secundus and the tricks he taught you there. The slicing sword is only half of the movement. Even as you smack it aside, his claws are punching up to crush your ribs. Your talon slaps them away. You show him you have not forgotten the techniques he taught you in those 30 sweet years. You hope it might make him recall. It doesn't. He ignores your playful reminder of the tight bond you once shared, just as he ignored you when he marched into your court, and just as he refused to acknowledge your generous terms for his submission. You are angry and hurt, scorned, indentured, ignored, disowned. The Emperor will never change, so the Emperor must die. Though he is your father and you didn't want it to end like this, he has left you no other choice, and now you have something to prove. Yourself. This has become more than a formality of execution. He will acknowledge you before you kill him. You will make him confess the sins he has committed against you. You are not one enemy to be illuminated or Xenos threat to be extinguished. You have accomplished more in your brief centuries than he has done in his eternity. You have outdone him. You are his superior, his successor, his heir. You're going to get that recognition. You're going to make him look you in the face and, with his last breath, scream it.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Emperor's fight versus Horus that we all know. It's good family fun. It's a father and son beating every shade of hell possible out of one another. After that point in the fight, things take a massive right turn. Dan Abnett is very clear that this is the ultimate fight in Warhammer 40k. Nothing gets to a higher level than this. Because of Horus's actions throughout the Siege of Terra, when they actually fight, they are basically in the warp, or at least they're in a part of reality that is so drenched in the warp, there's practically no difference. The Emperor has basically made a great error in challenging his son in this realm, but he is still the master of mankind. So as you will see in this passage, the Emperor does still have a few tricks left up his sleeve, and he will use them against Horus. And Horus, the far younger commander and warrior, ultimately has to sort of respond with his massive degree of power, but far less finesse. So we'll see the Emperor in a moment utilize the full extent of his power, a level of psychic mastery and warpcraft that we've just never seen in Warhammer 40k. Horus will respond, and in addition to this, as I say, this is Dan Abnett's ultimate battle. And so in such a mammoth conflict, of course, the Master of Mankind would draw on the strength of every single one of his loyal sons.
His guard is wide open for a moment. You plunge into that gap with your talon as straight as daggers. He makes a deflection, slightly unrefined, but successful, cracking sparks off your wrist guard with his blade. That pivots you out of the optimum line of address, so you club his plastron with the butt of Worldbreaker's haft, jar him off step, then let your grip slip to the base and loop the maul at him with full extension. His parry is particularly impressive. He parries your swing with Cthonia. You are on the flat top of a dirty rockreed parapet above a stagnant spillway. The radioactive glare is as harsh as the stink of the place. He is making his riposte. War sword glinting in the ionizing light. You knock it back, then you pitch ruthless blows at one another as you move along the lip of the decaying bulwark. Did he think that memories of your wretched childhood here would prise open your guard? Manipulation of the psychotecture to wrongfoot you is an impressive trick. No. Great gods. This is Cthonia. He hasn't just refashioned the psychoscape of your court as a makeshift weapon. He has shifted you both across the 3 dimensions of physical locality and the 4th of temporal placement. This is Cthonia,
the hinterland of the Athenat Exhaustion, where the territories of the Catalan and Gestarin clans meet in dispute. This may be the very day on which you were found. He can see your surprise. He pushes in to exploit it. You hammer away a series of aggressive sword strokes. In pulling off this trick, he has revealed his understanding of your domain. Not just your court, but the wider realm of chaos that inevitably surrounds it. He has grasped that everything and everywhere and everywhen meets here in your isochronal nexus, conjoined by the warp. And thus everything and everywhere and everywhen is accessible. It's not your father's power, it's what he does with it. Yet, for the sake of an impressive parry, he has given away two crucial secrets. First, the true extent of his warpcraft, which means that your psychic duel, already running alongside your physical conflict, must now take precedence. The second is his shameless cruelty. Cthonia wasn't a clever parry to avert your hurtling maul. It was a cold-blooded riposte intended to wound you. For reasons you cannot quite determine, your father seems to have no emotional core. Perhaps the damage done to him as he fought his way through the vengeful spirit was more considerable than you thought. Perhaps he is injured more grievously than he appears. Perhaps that is why he seems so cold, and why he refused to acknowledge you, his first found son. But you do possess a vital emotional core, and he knows it because he gave it to you. And now he seeks, without remorse, to inflict wounds upon it, wounds as deep and as critical as a blade to the heart or a hammer to the skull. He seeks to hurt you where the marks will not show, tear you deep inside, stab you through the soul, and bleed you out until you are too weak to defend yourself. And then he can finish you, by any means necessary. Whatever it takes, this is a low blow, unsporting, a dirty trick. It hasn't worked, of course, because the Athenat Exhaustion simply serves to remind you how far you've come and what you have achieved. It is amusing to think he believes this causes you any kind of pain. And it tellingly reveals a third truth too. To stoop so low, to attempt something so intentionally callous, your father must be desperate. He is backed into a corner, and he is trying anything and everything to keep you at bay. You renew the vigor of your assault. Your maul batters his plate and refractor fields. The echoes of those impacts ring from the forlorn walls and polluted spoil heaps of your foundling years. He cleaves back with his warsword and scythes with claws. You make your riposte, the Himalaya, the roof of the world that was. He reels from his counterattack, and you slide together down a steep slope of powder snow, exchanging blows at close quarters. You show him you can fight as unscrupulously as him. These are the soaring peaks that his pride will level. Let him contemplate a lonely death here, unmourned and unmarked, surrounded by the snow-capped emblems of his titanic hubris. He does not waver, he maintains his rate, not a hint of gapping in his guard, driving you down the blinding white flank of snow, ice and crystals swirling around you like winter breath, his sword seeking your heart, his claws hunting your throat. You stop with Worldbreaker's Haft, lunge with your talon. He parries you with Istvan 5, still white hot and smouldering from your victory. The air is dense with virus smog and organic ash, and the ground beneath your feet is a solid block of fused ceramite, like a toppled frieze depicting battle brothers at war. Perhaps he can illuminate you. How is this supposed to hurt? He did this, not you. The atrocity is his fault, and with your next blow, you show him why. Molech. Yes, Molech. Nothing but a festering darkness in which falsehoods whisper and lies spread. There is a faint glimmer of the gate through which he once passed, to make promises he would break and to steal the fire he would covet for himself. Here is the stink of true betrayal, of old gods antagonized by a solemn pact dishonored, of secret truths and dreadful insights that, in defiance of all reason, will never be shared with the sons who love him. This is the birthplace of all deceit.
From this source came all the fundamental doctrines he should have taught you and your brothers, the knowledge that would have fortified you and protected you and allowed you to build an interstellar culture on solid foundations. He taught you nothing. He let you go among the stars, ignorant and vulnerable. This place, more than any other, epitomizes the toxic privacy that has dominated his behavior, the selfish, inquisitive greed, and the abject lack of trust he has shown to his own flesh and blood. To you. He names you betrayer. He declares you traitor. He believes your dissent is heresy, but heresy requires a truth to oppose. Hypocrite! The truth was here all along, but he kept it from you. The darkness is a testament to his obsessive, hermetic indifference. He betrayed you and your siblings and your sons. The fire was meant to be shared. Instead, he used it to ignite a war. He let the galaxy burn. Molech seems to shake him like a solid body blow. As his guard slips, you block his sword and spear him to the core with a beam of bloodlight that lances from the unblinking eye on your chestplate. He writhes on that skewer of red rage. It has punctured his soul and amputated 900 years of his life. You keep him pinned with the beam, still bleeding years in arterial torrent, and you open your talon, raking him with incandescent lightning. The lightning drawn from the deepest storms of the Imperium fries his flesh and roasts him alive. His agony is profound. He tries to tear free, but neither the bloodlight nor the lightning will let him go. You increase the fury of both. They destroy him. He explodes in a cloud of white ash. Nothing remains but silence. Some of the ash drifts back across you, dusting the contours of your warplate. Nothing remains except a patch of vitrified ground. Are you done? It can't be that easy. You unfurl your mind sight and survey the intermingled territories of your realm. Ah, yes. Not done at all. Across the planes and layers of your day of days, the propagating jewels of your psychomania are still raging. Honest Van 5, you are cracking his golden plate with Worldbreaker as he sears you with wild bolts of immaterial power. In the lost Himalaya, he pursues you down a sheer incline of green ice and black rock, lacerating your face with his relentless warsword. In the abandoned workings beneath the Athenat exhaustion, you hang back and mind-goad mobs of Catalan, Justarin, and Hellebore gangers to swarm him in a blitz attack. White fire blazes from his irritated eyes as he blinks one to atoms. Then he blinks again and annihilates the rest in a swathe of flame. You behold them all, every facet of this psychic jewel, occurring simultaneously. In some, like Mohenjo-Daro, where you spill his blood on the mound, where this great city is yet to be built, or Casa Undak on Cadia, where you pin him to a Noctilith pylon with your talon. You are clearly winning. In others, like Goro Scrapworld, where he herds a war of Xenos brutes with his will to rend you limb from limb, or Tizkar, where a spark from his mind has just set you on fire. He has the upper hand. In others, like the court, where you still slug it out, hand to hand, or the mirror-finished field of the triumph on Ulanor, where you both stand frozen, face to face, your minds locked in furiously silent thought war. The contest remains in the balance, and the outcome undecided. Here, on Molech, you have simply concluded one bout. You have killed but a piece of him. Except there and there, those bright spots on the ground, splashes of the years you bled out of him, coagulating puddles of days and droplets of hours. The trail leads away. Not dead. Not dead after all. He merely sacrificed an aspect to end his agony and cover his escape. You follow that trail, picking up speed. Spatters of his life loss drip from the black rocks and quiver on the dirt like beads of mercury. He is wounded, hurt, hemorrhaging years in grisly quantities. If you had spilled so much lifetime, you would be dead. but lifetime is the only thing he has more of than you do. He will be weak though, dizzy, close to bleeding out, unless he can tourniquet his leaking soul. Where does the trail lead? To the left, into the burned desolation of Macragge? No, the right. You unfold yourself and step into New Byzantium, just before the Pan-Pacific annexation. The speckled trail leads into an echoing stretch of Calth's underworld, then doubles back into the hull-wreck wastes of Talon, where you struggle to detect it in the blowing dust. You persevere and track on between the wind-blown longhouses and an island off pre-strife Albia, where frightened faces watch you from behind rush shutters. The traces are clearer here, marking the grass. He hasn't been able to staunch the flow. How is he still standing? You see a wet handprint on a standing stone where he leaned to catch his breath. You step into a longhouse and into another facet, Crusade-era Darwin. You look around the dim stone chamber and bring Worldbreaker up. He will turn here, surely. This is a good place for an ambush, for the name itself has intrinsic power over you. So you pull aside a curtain and step into the rose-red colonnade of a Selenar compound on Luna. The fine Chakaldany arcade is bathed in earthlight and utterly silent. When is this? Before unification? It doesn't matter. He fells you from behind with a thought blast, and you roll and try to get up. He lifts you in a telekine vice and puts you through the colonnade wall. Quartz shatters. You land hard. Not so weak then. Not so hard. He leaps at you through the hole torn in the wall, his warsword swooping down. He nearly takes your arm off. You block his follow-up stroke with the head of your maul and lash at him with your talon. He evades. His eyes light up, projecting twin beams of phosphorescent light that burn into your chest and slide you backwards across the quartz-littered floor until you ignite the eye on your breastplate to counter his power with some of your own. Your stream of roaring bloodlight entangles with his stream of white mindfire. Where they touch, the energies conflict in a vortical lesion where materia screams and immateria bubbles and deforms. You take a step forward, driving your energy against his. He holds his ground, braced. You take another pace, the pitch of your energy scream increases. Another step, the howling intensity reaches critical. A swathe of the immaterial fabric between you both annihilates, and the real space threads woven through it explode. The shock pulse knocks him backwards and shatters the facet of Luna around you. The violent fractal shift leaves you both in a dank, nameless cavern somewhere, with the fireball of conflagration still dissipating between you. You charge through those flames, maul raised. He throws another thought blast at you to drive you back, but it's poorly formed and merely grazes off your shields. Worldbreaker puts a sizzling dent in his refractors, so deep his ailing reactor surely cannot maintain function much longer. He drives his warsword through your left shoulder. You smack him aside with your maul. His sword is wrenched out of you as he spins away, blood trailing from the fuller. Each impact is luring odd echoes out of the acoustics of the old cave. Echoes that swim around the natural calcite columns, the dripping stone arches, and the crude handprints on the dim walls. He turns, head low, and applies a stunning sequence of sword strokes that he must surely have been taught by an Eldari autarch. You struggle to hold guard. You can't get past their lethal precision. You need room to move. You are not limited by the 4 dimensions of materia. You have the numberless angles of the Imperium at your command. You concoct an occulting aegis and dodge sideways along the 12th intersection of the immaterial, weaving between thorn trees in the malnourished light to outflank him. He sees you coming in his peripheral mindsight and takes guard with his sword across the 66th oblique where the skull-colored moon never sets, while carving some radiant sigil on the air with his claws, and propelling it at you along the veil of creatures where barking demented things writhe around you. You smash the screaming sigil with your maul. Before it touches you, it shatters like dry clay, and you smell the stink of Sigilite magic. Such feeble technique, the damned Sigilites were only ever dabblers, their amateur warpcraft unfit for the full manipulation of the etheric. But it was a decoy. The spearing fingers of his lightning claw splay wide and are, for an instant, webbed with squirming voltaics. Then the accumulated charge erupts from his palm and forks towards you. The jagged bolt strikes you, and you feel its fire in your marrow. You are thrown against a limestone pillar, smoke and agony broiling off you in equal measure. His sword flashes down to decapitate you. A killing cut, and a perfect one. You recognize it. It is the exact peerless execution stroke that Sanguinius tried to deliver. Your father is showing you the tricks he taught his other son. No matter. The war sword cuts the limestone as easily as a human throat. You have drawn real space aside like a curtain and rolled out of the way. You drop from the ancient limestone cavern into an adjacent layer of the warp's fluid territories. You land on your feet and compose yourself, your limbs aching from the touch of his lightning. You look around. You need to find a better facet in which to make a stand. You cross the keening gulf of lament, leaping along a long, narrow bridge of living flesh that throbs with febrile neuroplasticity and spans a bottomless aeonic pit. But he has followed you, unfolding materia to pursue you across the interstices of dimension to the brazen screaming steps of the Bastion Stair in the realm of red. He can track you somehow, catching your scent despite your efforts to ascend the rippling steps and evade through the mists of unreason, and then across the bleak plateau of the blizzard of forgetting. He is drawing on all his gifts, many of them gifts he passed on to his sons. High below you, he is a blood-stained magician, transfixing you with his baleful eye so that no pleat of reality can conceal you. A salvo of fireballs bursts from that malefic eye, and they fly at you like blazing meteorites along every axis of the infinite planes. They are closing in on you and will strike simultaneously. You cast a copy of yourself out of old shadows for them to target, and escape the ferocious detonation through a dilating gate of black bone that deposits you behind him. Then you cave in the back of his head with Worldbreaker. But he has channeled the purest cunning. You have killed nothing more than the Warpflux Simulacrum, an effigy to draw you in. A false twin. The real him is deep above you, closing fast. You dart away into the crook of shadows, the dingy slanting subdimension where nothing is upright and everything is corners. He is a hound at your heels, a loping wolf. He has assumed a lycanthropic aspect, and he has your spore. His sword is an executioner's axe, his canines long, and he drags winter behind him like a pelt. You have no patience for such brute wrath, so you quickly weave a labyrinth to delay him. As the wolf slows, confounded, you tie the labyrinth back upon itself to confuse him, and remove its exits to entrap him. How bitterly apt that he draws upon these atavistic qualities to gain advantage. They are old, tired traits he perfected long ago. You, however, have changed and grown beyond him. Your desire to walk down this path of glory, to achieve more than him, to surpass him and supersede him, is a clear demonstration of your intent to reject his musty legacy. Others, your rivals, even your allies, have blamed this growth on your arrogance, on your pride, on envy even. They've said it so much and so often, you've begun to believe it yourself. But it's not true. You have done all you have done to escape his shadow, to be yourself rather than a pale and lesser imitation. You are not some mewling biblo infant, dumbly trying to copy everything its father does. You are not part of him. Everything you have achieved, from the unraveling of the Imperium to the compliance of Terra and the overthrow of his great plan, you have done to validate your growth. And now, Your absolute mastery of chaos proves it, because that is something he either couldn't do or feared to even try. You are Horus Lupercal, Ascendant Instrument of Chaos. That accomplishment alone proves you are no puppet or inferior copy. You used to be afraid of his power. Now, his power is but a drop in your ocean. You hear stone splintering and walls collapsing. He has taken the aspect of a great architect and drawn a plan to escape your labyrinth, discerning the infinitesimal weaknesses where walls meet. He has taken the aspect of an obliterator and broken through that weakness with etheric siege engines. He has taken the aspect of a swift and clever raven through the salt-caked and asymmetric chambers of the drifting castle, and the aspect of the steppe horseman to harness that raven's speed into fluid motion that shifts him from the 80th conjunction to the fever meadows of Longuo, and then around the vast and root-gnarled base of the towering Tree of Souls to disguise his indirect route of attack. He has taken on the predatory guile of a lion to hunt you along the wild shores of the Sea of Souls, and the fearless certainty of an avenging sun to deliver final illumination. He has a dynasty of aspects to draw upon, a bloodline of faces and meanings and talents. What he can do, you can do better, because you can do anything. You take refuge in the mildewed Marcher fortress that watches the stained margins of the plains of excess, and there take the aspect of terror and flood the dark approaches of the marches with dread, to slow his advance by creating a soulless track device on which he will fear to tread. You close the living earth around you, forging tectonic bulwarks and walls of impassable furnace flame. You infect the rusted gates and the creaking sails of windmills with contagious sigils that buzz with crawling flies and reek of decomposition that will communicate wasting death to any who look upon them. From the hymnals of the Neverborn, you take sonorous litanies and sow their words across every angle. Your father will not abide a single syllable of those antiphonic chants. They will drive him back. They will drive him mad. You nail a gladiator's agony into your heart to gird yourself with its unquenchable rage. You now have the purest fury of all with which to greet him. You wait, simmering. Just for good measure, you ready your execution stroke. You wait. You wait. Your rage begins to cool. You wonder if you really need it. Do you need any of it? The flaming bulwark walls, the venerating litanies, the crucifying rage, the fly-blown sigils of mortality. Surely you don't. You are Horus Lupercal. You have vowed to be your own man and prove your own worth. You are not some chimerical combination of other souls. You don't need that. That's what your father does, and you despise his methods. Don't be like him. Listen, the greatest satisfaction will come from beating him as you. Think of it. Think of the pleasure that will bring you, the sweet, satiating delight of victory on your terms. You see, you can't deny it. That's what you want. That's what you crave. You let the aspects slip away. You let the walls subside and the sigils expire. You silence the liturgical voices and let go of the rage. You want to meet him as yourself.
Outside of Litu literally looking into the eyes of the blood god, that chapter for me is the craziest part of the end of the Horus heresy. There is so much to break down. If you were listening there, you will know that Dan Abnett just broke so many rules of Warhammer, rules that just can't be broken, and that's kind of the point, that this is a battle between the Emperor of Mankind and the ultimate avatar of chaos. It's as close as you can get to a battle between gods. The first thing to point out is that this truly is time travel, right? This isn't just kind of like an interstellar deal or something where the Emperor's made it look like Cthonia. In fact, that's what Horus suspects at first. And then he realizes, oh no, we are actually on Cthonia. The Emperor has moved us both across time and space. And then something insane happens where Horus is able to use his power to control Chthonian gangers to attack Horus. But the Emperor is not taking that, and later on, he will control the orcs to attack Horus on Goro. That is officially canon now, that the orcs aided the Emperor of Mankind in his battle against Horus. Again, these are things that should not happen, but it is a battle between gods. A big part of this passage is really Dan Abnett's kind of love letter to the Horus heresy. You'll notice so many little things dropped in across Molech, Istvan. He would mention like book titles like Fear to Tread, all these sorts of things. Dan Abnett is just writing his ultimate work, and it's very obvious how much he's having a good time writing this story. Before we have a bit more look at the places that they travel to as well, I did want to point out some things that surely would have made you go, hang on, what's that? There's a part in the passage where Horus actually points out that he has stripped 900 years off of the Emperor's life. Something that doesn't make sense because, of course, as far as we know, the Emperor is immortal. And there's even this bit that talks about how the Emperor's soul is starting to bleed out of his body. So what this means for the setting is one of those things where it could be nothing, could be everything. Because if the Emperor is no longer immortal, that's a big problem for Warhammer 40k. Potentially puts another time constraint that the Imperium has to get everything fixed outside of the Golden Throne itself just failing, and the Tyranids and Necrons, etc., etc. But that's a huge deal. If that means something, which it might well do, then yeah, I guess we'll see. As far as we know, the Emperor's body is in a really bad state. So the idea that Horus has knocked some years off there, that may come up again in the future. Then what have we got? The Emperor being supposedly taught by an Eldari Autarch. The Autarchs of the Eldari are some of their greatest warriors, often warriors that have completed paths of the Eldar. Now, it is implied in Warhammer 40k that the Emperor did ally with the Eldari in the past before he took up his, let's say, anti-Xenos mentality that, of course, defines the Imperium of Man. Eldrad Ulthuan, for example, definitely implies to Rabute Guilliman that Eldrad and the Emperor have worked together before. In addition, we do know that the great empires of humanity and Eldari, or should I say the great lost empires of humanity and the Eldari, did work together. We do know they did trade, etc., etc., and we see that, for example, through there are meeting places that are, of course, no longer used, but apparently used to be used between humanity and the Eldar. Presumably, the Emperor's got a relationship there, and the idea that he was taught blade work by the Eldari is a really cool little detail. It makes a lot of sense. Really like that. Horus focuses a lot in this passage on the Emperor's power level. It actually says that the Emperor's power is but a drop in Horus's ocean, and this seems to be confirmed multiple times in the novel, mainly by the fact that anytime Horus actually wants to bring his father down, he seems to have no problem doing so. You can just knock the Emperor down in one blow, for example, right at the start, and he does that multiple times. And even when the Emperor steals Horus's power later on, Horus doesn't even notice, because to Horus, the Emperor's power is nothing, and he's just reached such a high level. And according to Horus, he could have killed the Emperor at any point in time. Seemingly the Emperor also knows this, because he tells Gavior Loken and co that there's nothing he can do to defeat his son, and the only way he's able to eke out a victory at the end is by ultimately just kind of tricking Horus Lupercal. And the very funny thing about that is that throughout the book, Horus is very angry about the fact that his father is really just a trickster. That's what the Emperor is. If the Emperor is a god, he's the trickster god, and yet Horus falls for the simplest of tricks. One of these tricks comes up in this passage. Horus notices that the Emperor of Mankind seemingly has no emotional core. The Emperor isn't able to be manipulated by, Horus weaponizing his dead children against him or weaponizing his past against him. The Emperor seems really unmoved. And the really funny thing about this is that Horus is looking at his father, and bear in mind, Horus has just killed his own brother, and yet he's looking at the Emperor and thinking, you are messed up in the head. Like, yeah, I just killed my brother, but you're not even moved. All of the other people in the room, Gavio Loken, Litu, the custodian, Kekautus Dusk, they see the dead body of Sanguinius and they fall to their knees and cry. The Emperor doesn't even seem to care. And Horus isn't aware of what we know, which of course is that the reason the Emperor is unmoved by these events is because the Emperor siphoned off parts of his own soul. It said his love, loyalty, and compassion. Now, clearly little bits of them remain within this body of the Emperor, but significant parts of them were siphoned off before the fight. Well, there was a couple of reasons, but one of the main ones is that the Emperor knew Horus Lupercal would use these things against him. So he took such a drastic measure to cut apart his own soul in order to prepare himself for the fight. Completely nuts. Across that passage, they time travel and travel across space as well. So they go to Cthonia originally. It very much sort of reads like the Emperor has thrown a planet at his son. That's what I thought was happening at first. But then, of course, Horus reveals that this is actually time travel. At the start of the fight, both the Emperor and Horus are basically moving themselves to places to try and emotionally manipulate their opponent, just get under their skin. So Cthonia, of course, is where Horus is from. And then you have the Himalaya, which Horus chooses for a fascinating reason. It's this idea that the Himalaya represents the Emperor's greatest arrogance. It's such a wonderful part of humanity's homeworld. Mount Everest is, we might say today. And it was one of the few things that seemingly survived the age of strife. And yet the Emperor kind of demolishes it to make way for the Imperial Palace, or at least significant parts of it. It's a representation of his greatest hubris, which I thought was quite clever. I've never really seen the Himalaya brought up in that regard before, but I thought that was quite cool. Then, of course, you've got some obvious ones. Istvan 5, the Great Betrayal, the Drop Site Massacre, Molech, the Gateway to Chaos, one of the 3 gateways to Chaos, where the Emperor went through and made a deal with the Chaos gods. And then you get some really crazy places. So Mohenjo-Daro, Goro Scrapworld, Tizca. They also go to Kauth, the homeworlds of other Primarchs. They're going all over the shop. And then my favorite one, hands down, hence the title of this live stream, they travel to Kaza Undak on Cadia. Now, Cadia, of course, is a planet that exists very near to the Eye of Terror. Very famous planet, unfortunately has had some issues in recent times in 40k. But at this point in time in the Horus Heresy, Cadia is still around. However, it's not Cadia as we know it. So Lorgar Aurelian does travel to Cadia in the Great Crusade. That's a big part of the first Heretic novel, and he meets kind of the mutants that exist there, and that's where we first see this idea of Cadians having kind of purple eyes. However, the Emperor and Horus specifically travel to Kaza Undak on Cadia. The Kazas are the names of the big fortified cities of the Cadians. So the Emperor and Horus travel to one of the Imperium's greatest cities. They travel forwards in time to one of these cities, and it specifically said they pop out onto Cadia, and Horus beats the Emperor into a Necron pylon. The Necron pylons are a huge reason Cadia was such an important planet. It's really hard not to let the mind wander with this kind of idea. It very much suggests that there's a possibility in Warhammer 40k, before Cadia fell, one Imperial Guardsman was walking along, and then all of a sudden, a giant gold man and a giant shadowy black figure pop out of nowhere, throw a few punches, the figure in black beats the figure in gold into a Necron pylon, and then they disappear. It's very much a thing that could have happened, and it's certainly canon that they travelled forwards in time to Cadia. It's also one of those things where if Games Workshop want to, they can definitely draw upon this in the future. There are many ways the Emperor can kind of communicate with his servants in Warhammer 40k, of course. We have the dreams of the custodians. You can speak to him face to face, like Guilliman. He can implant messages in people, like he does when he tries to speak to Belisari is cool. But this is also presumably one of them. If the Emperor was able to, because they're fighting across multiple planes all at once, and the Emperor is able to hide from Horus for small little bits, the Emperor presumably might be able to speak to a Primarch or a servant here or there in Warhammer 40k. And I sort of love this idea that they could do that. I also really love the idea that there's just one Cadian that just randomly saw the Emperor and Horus fighting one day, and of course went back to the barracks, told everybody, and no one believed him. This is such a fun part of the lore. Of course, it's getting completely insane at this point in time. I know some people will have an issue with this. I know there's a big issue people have with time travel generally. We've spoken about that a lot on the channel, and trust me, I get it. I get why time travel is such a controversial thing. However, in this fight specifically, come on, we got to let Dan Abnett have some fun here, because of course, like I say, this is sort of his, taking you on a journey throughout the Horus heresy in its own kind of crazy messed up way. And in addition to that, nothing gets bigger than this in Warhammer. Not until we have like a Dark King storyline or a Star Child storyline in Warhammer 40k will things ever reach this peak. And so the idea that Dan Abnett slipped in a little bit of time travel into this part of the story, I think makes sense. I don't think this story will have huge negative ramifications upon the setting. So I've actually really enjoyed this, but I understand that some people will probably not be too happy about more time travel, because there has been a lot of it in 40k in recent years, but I really enjoyed this part of the story. During Big E versus Horus, the attacks that Horus blocked from Big E, if one or more of them actually landed on Horus, would it have been able to actually stop Horus? So Big E does get some attacks in that land on Horus. That does happen in the story. And Horus is able to heal himself very quickly. The answer, as far as we know, is no. The analogy Horus uses is a drop in the ocean. And I don't think it was ever possible that the Emperor could beat Horus just through might alone. He's basically playing the entire fight in order to manipulate his son. Garvio Loken is the key to manipulate Horus into giving up his power. And I guess the Emperor sort of goes in knowing that Horus's arrogance is going to be what would win him the fight at the end of the day, that he can kind of trick Horus into giving up his power so that he's no longer this slave to the Chaos God. So I suspect the Emperor went in with a rough plan, but we don't know yet. I feel like we should also talk not just about these physical places that they travel to, but of course, they also seemingly travel across various places in the warp. They all have nuts names. Some of them might have come up in other books. I did have a look. The Sea of Souls is a very popular one. There are some that Garvio Loken sees the Emperor and Horus fight in later on also. It should be said, I didn't play it today, but there is a bit later on in the story where Garvio Loken will see Horus and the Emperor fight sort of through the warp. They both take on like various kind of forms, a Fenrisian king, the Pale Death, an eagle and a snake and that kind of thing. It all gets a bit nuts. There's a lot of symbolism and a lot of things you could sort of read into them. So, I mean, yeah, please do let me know in the comments if there's anything that really stands out to you as some amazing symbolism. A lot of it will be non-Warhammer 40k. My favorite dimension that they seemingly fight in, it's not entirely clear, but it seems to be this sort of dimension of the Sigilites. Right, so Malkador the Sigilite was not the only Sigilite, he was one of an order. As we see in the battle, the Emperor is able to use kind of Sigilite power, just like Malkador does, which Horus doesn't respect. Very important to remember that Horus hates the Sigilite more than pretty much anyone else, because of that time Malkador sort of choked him out, and Horus never forgot this. So when the Emperor uses what he calls Sigilite magic, he judges the Emperor for this. They seemingly travel through this dimension that the Sigilites used to live in or work in or something like that. And that was a really interesting little tidbit. We don't know very much about the Sigilites at all. in that passage, I thought it was so cool to see the Emperor sort of use the gifts of the loyal Primarchs, the fortress making of Rogal Dawn, the cunning guile of the Lion. All these sorts of things are used against Horus. And Horus uses the traitor Primarchs in response, but then he decides not to use these aspects of his brothers because he wants to beat the Emperor just as himself, with no help from anybody else. However, the fact that the Emperor is able to use these gifts of him is a really fascinating little tidbit. It follows on, I guess, in the final book of the Horus Heresy, Era of Ruin, where the custodian Diocletian, he seemingly debunks a relatively common 40k theory, which is that the Primarchs are sort of aspects of the Emperor. He put part of himself into each of them. And he says that didn't happen. That's not what it was. But certainly each one of them has got a bit of the Emperor sort of aspect of him, and they each embody a specific part of the Master of Mankind. Interestingly, in this area, we see this with Sanguinius, for example, and Rogal Dawn, the Primarchs can go beyond even the Emperor in some specific ways. And that's a really interesting idea because it gives the Primarchs unique edges in fights. That chapter is one of the craziest chapters in the entire library of Warhammer 40k. I think that there were so many, oh my god, moments in that book, and a bunch of them appear in that passage that I read today. You have Horus taking years from the Emperor's life. You have them actually time traveling across planets and seemingly to Cadia in 40k. Then you've got the Emperor using orcs in his fight against Horus, and the revelation that the Emperor apparently was taught by the Eldari Autarchs how to wield a sword, and just absolutely nuts combat, as you can imagine, as Horus and the Emperor try to manipulate one another by bringing up past memories, and Horus is completely blindsided by the fact that the Emperor can't be manipulated with emotion because his emotional core doesn't really seem to be there anymore, and we know why, because the Emperor severed off part of his own soul. But Horus doesn't know this. As they travel through the warp as well, you've got just all kinds of crazy places. They travel through the 12th intersection of the immaterial, a realm of thorn trees, the Vale of Creatures, the 66th oblique, an ancient limestone cavern, the bleak plateau of the blizzard of forgetting, the fever meadows of long woe, the vast and root-gnarled base of the towering tree of souls, the wild shores, the hulk of the major arcana, the silver door, the shattered world, a snow-clad flank of some towering mountain peak. If any of those mean anything to people who are better read in non-Warhammer 40k literature than me, please do let me know in the comments, because I'll be interested to see the references Dan Abnett's drop in throughout that novel. Yeah, an incredible fight scene there, in my opinion, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, anything with time travel, it's going to be a little bit controversial, and I expect some of those comments below, but I think this is relatively contained and is very cool, and it is the ultimate climax of the Horus Heresy. So I think Dan Abnett is justified in going a bit mad with the time travel in this book, but hey, let me know what you guys think. But thank you so much for watching this live stream. If you enjoyed it, please do consider supporting the channel. You can click join on the page below. I will be off this weekend as I have my stag party, but I have a big video coming out hopefully very soon, so stay tuned for that. And thank you for watching. See you next time.
And that's a wrap for today's stream. If you enjoy these kinds of Warhammer 40k lore breakdowns and discussions, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss me going live. For those of you who want extra content and to support the channel, consider clicking the join button. Becoming a member will give you access to more videos and streams, and our Discord community, where you can chat with other lore enthusiasts and myself. Thanks again for watching, look out for any chaos or gene stealer cults in your area, and I'll see you next time.